John Harbaugh announced that the Baltimore Ravens have made their decisions on their starting offensive line. We talk about that, the Ravens potentially being aggressive and rounding out their roster, cut down day, and so much more coming up next on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Allstriker of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day and a part of your day in general. We're free and available for you, all podcasting platforms in video form on YouTube, audio form wherever you get your shows. It's the same show, both audio and video. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. We bring you 5 days a week of Ravens content, Monday through Friday, plus bonus episodes going live after every single piece of Ravens big news, after every single Ravens game. And we will be live later today breaking down and reacting to the Ravens and what they ended up doing with their roster. The first wave of roster cuts already in. The big cut of the night last night was Pepe Williams, who we did say on this show, if you listen to my final roster predictions show yesterday where I laid it all out there, Pepe Williams was not on my roster. But it's still tough. It's a really tough day, tough couple days for these guys getting cut. You got to feel for them. We have quite literally a jam-packed episode today. I mean, look, there were like 5 different things that happened yesterday, Ravens-wise, not to even mention CeeDee Lamb's big extension in Dallas and all the other NFL craziness. But John Harbaugh said that the Ravens have come to a decision on their offensive line. So we'll talk about what he said, which really wasn't a lot. He didn't end up announcing the starters, but he did say a couple of interesting things that might allude to how the Ravens want to use these guys this year. And while we might see, the starting 5, we might see more than that. So we'll talk about what he meant in the first part of the show. Then we got some interesting insights from a couple people covering the Ravens, Jeff Rebeck, who's a friend of the show, a couple of others as well, about the Ravens potentially being aggressive. We'll talk about some options about how they could fill out the back end of their roster. And then finally, we'll go over the first cuts that were made for the Ravens and dive into who could be next and just go over a little bit more of roster construction and who might stay and who might go. So let's talk about what John Harbaugh had to say, and ended up talking about the competitive advantage of everything. And that's really, the Ravens are one of the teams that definitely love their competitive advantage. And we know that from the way they handle practice, the way that they, keep stuff very tight to the vest. Well, John Harbaugh was asked about his offensive line. And first of all, he was asked about Joe D, who again tragically passed away on Sunday. And again, thoughts and prayers out to the Ravens organization and Joe D's family, friends. But a lot of it was talked about, Joe D being the influence and the impact guy and just the incredible coach and even better human that he was. John Harbaugh saying that they will dedicate the season to both Jacoby Jones and Joe D. But when talking about the offensive line, Harbaugh was asked about if they made a decision about any of the 3 open spots on the line. And John Harbaugh said, quote, "We have. I'm not going to make any announcements on any starting announcements going to the Chiefs game. But what would be the point? We just go play the game, or we'll just go play the game," John Harbaugh said. And then he was followed up. It was a follow-up question about rotating tackles. Is that something that they could do this season? And John Harbaugh said, sure. He said, quote, "That definitely could be a possibility. I think that's something that we did last year effectively. It's kind of a new strategy. Not many people have done that before. We'll have to take credit for it with Joe D. That's one of Joe D's innovations." So, again, no announcement. The Ravens didn't make the decisions John Harbaugh announced, so that's a big step. We're not going to know that probably until a couple days before, if not game day, with how the Ravens operate. But that's the rotating tackles thing. I've been clear, at least on my stance on this. Sure, it's innovative. It's new. It's something I've never seen before. But I don't think you win a Super Bowl that way. And apparently, friend of the show, Cole Jackson, I'm going to pull up his tweet real quick, does great film work on the Ravens and is the go-to Ravens film guy. He ended up saying that the understanding for him is that the Ravens are worried about Patrick McCarry's durability. They don't want to have him start for 17 games. So with everything put into perspective, with every single point that we're getting here and, kind of piecing things together, the educated guess that I have, this isn't what I would do, but the educated guess I would have here is that the Ravens saw what happened last season with Ronnie Stanley, who struggled early in the season with an injury, came back. They did the rotation for both him and Morgan Moses, who was also dealing with an injury, and it worked for him. It helped get Stanley and Moses off the field, helped get their other guys in there. I think at some point this season we see it. And I don't necessarily agree with it. I think it is not the thing that I would do. I just think that it messes with rhythm, messes with rotation, and it's both sides. There are advantages and disadvantages where it also messes with the timing of the defense where, if you're a defensive lineman and you've timed up one of the starting offensive tackles, well, you bring in another guy and you don't have that guy timed up. So it's definitely both ways here. But to me, I think that that's where they're going to go. And I feel like it's going to be like the opposite of what everybody thinks. Just as a prediction, I feel like it's going to be Faalele and I feel like it's going to be McCary to start. But I think Rosengarten ends up ending the year. I think McCary starts the year, Rosengarten ends the year. Whether it is due to health and hopefully knock on wood, that is not the case. But I think Rosengarten does end the season. I personally believe it should be Ben Cleveland. I just think that there's a higher floor with Ben Cleveland than there is Daniel Faalele. I thought Faalele was fine in pass protection, right? I think everybody's kind of saying, oh, Faalele was terrible the whole preseason, get him out of here, get him out of here. There were bad reps. There were definitely bad reps. But in pass protection, I thought that he held up fine. It was the run blocking, slow getting to his spots, getting beat. That's the stuff that can't fly, and that's kind of the theme that we saw with a lot of these guys this preseason, where the run blocking it left a lot to be desired. We can be honest about that in certain areas with Rosengarten, with Voorhees, Faalele, Cleveland, all these guys. But the pass protection was solid. Rosengarten is as advertised in pass protection. I think that counts for something. But the key here is going into week one, I think they should go with the vet offensive line. I think they should go with McCary, and then I think they should go with Cleveland. I could also see them going with Faalele, Rosengarten if they really feel like they found something, and those are the guys that got the most reps together, right? The line they put out the most with those three spots were Voorhees at left guard, you got Rosengarten at right tackle, and you got Faalele at right guard. Those are the three guys who got out the most. So if you're like, okay, that's the continuity part, which I am a big proponent of continuity. I think it's important. But I think going against Kansas City, I'd put out the veteran line. I would. I think there's a higher floor with Ben Cleveland, as I talked about. I think there's a higher ceiling with Faalele, but I think the ceiling of Cleveland is close enough to Faalele's where you completely take Cleveland's ceiling with his higher floor, to me. Rosengarten, McCary is super high floor, in my opinion. He's solid. He's good. The ceiling is not necessarily, again, as high as Rosengarten. With the veteran line, the ceilings are not as high as the younger guys. But I think that you take the higher floor here. I think you take the higher floor if you're the offensive line because it's so important, especially in the run game. Derrick Henry's going to boost that run game a ton, right? Derrick Henry himself will do it, but he can't do it by himself. That's the issue. Derrick Henry is going to be this guy that, moves mountains for this team this season on the ground. But he needs to have an offensive line that can run block efficiently and effectively, get to their spots, kick out to the second level, make sure guys don't slip through the cracks. And personally, for the offensive line, early, I'm not saying this is what it's going to be the entire season. And again, Harbaugh never announced anything. But for the early start to the year, when you're trying to work through and get continuity with guys and figure things out and make sure you can rattle off a couple early wins for a competing team here, I would go with the veteran offensive line who has the higher floor, but somewhat lower ceiling, and then you can kind of work your way through there. So if they rotate tackles, we're going to have to deal with it. It's not what I would do, and I'm opposed to it personally, but we did see it have success for them last season when they started to do it. The issue is that it's not Morgan Moses who is going to be rotating for, Falele in this case, and Patrick McCary would probably rotate in. I mean, I don't even know what they would do. I mean, would they rotate in McCary at left tackle again if Rosengarten starts? Who rotates in for essentially it'd probably be a 3-man rotation. I think they would kind of revamp their style to it be a 3-man rotation. You can put Falele in, some level of a spot there, but are you rotating Rosengarten and Falele and then Stanley and McCary at those two spots? I think it might be 3, where it's almost like a 3-man weird thing where Stanley and Rosengarten start the game. Then McCary comes in for Stanley, and then Stanley comes back in, and then McCary goes in for Rosengarten, and that type of deal. Maybe it's that. I don't know. I mean, it was a crazy idea when we saw it happen for the Ravens in the first place, so why not get even crazier with it here? That is my crazy idea for the rotation. If it's not a when, it's if the Ravens use it. John Harbaugh did not commit to it. Obviously, he said it was a possibility, but if that is the case, look, it's already a crazy idea in its own right. Why not get a little crazier with it there? Coming up in the second part of the show, we'll talk about how the Ravens could potentially upgrade their roster after cut down day. Today, there are a bunch of different options that are either going to be cut or traded, and the Ravens are expected to be aggressive according to some people, so stay tuned. A lot to get to on the show. First, this show is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and I love going on FanDuel, looking at all of the options that they have to offer every day. And we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon at a market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment. You can cancel anytime. So for that Ravens and Chiefs game, it is coming up so quickly. The Ravens opened up as 2.5-point underdogs over on FanDuel. So if you like that line, head on over to FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and download America's #1 sportsbook. We're back. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Allstriker still here with you on this Taco Tuesday. Appreciate everybody for being here today, making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. Be sure to make your second listen Locked On Fantasy Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here, your team every day. They do a great job running you through all the fantasy need-to-knows for this upcoming season. We're doing a bunch of Locked On Ravens fantasy leagues this year, so if you're interested, be sure to message me, Twitter, Instagram. You can comment below on the posts I made as well. It's going to be fun. And, of course, here on Locked On Ravens, we do 5 days a week of daily Ravens coverage, Monday through Friday, bonus episodes after every single game, plus after every piece of Ravens big news, which means we will be going live later today again. Right after the Ravens release their roster, we'll be instantly reacting, breaking it all down. So be sure to subscribe, follow along, turn notifications on for the live. And if you're not tuning in for the live portion of it, it will be available for playback on YouTube, and also it'll be up in audio form after as well. Now, part of the way the Ravens are going to have to construct their roster this season is obviously not just with the guys currently on the roster, but some guys that might get cut, might get traded. We've talked about this for the past couple of weeks, is Baltimore's final roster, and this is for a lot of teams, not just the Ravens, but Baltimore's final roster is probably not everybody that we've been so accustomed to getting to know over these past couple of months. There are probably 1, 2, 3 players, maybe more, that are going to be signed to the practice squad, get acquired to be on the active roster, that are not currently with the team. There are a bunch of different options, and Jeff Zrebiec of The Athletic ended up putting together an article yesterday, and according to him, people believe that DeCosta will be aggressive, particularly trying to improve the team's offensive line depth, and they could be active. They could be aggressive in terms of making other moves as well. But there are a lot of options available, especially because Zrebiec himself expects the Ravens and DeCosta to be active over the next couple of days. He says looking at external options to improve the back end of the roster. So he says, making waiver claims, small trades potentially, signing street free agents. There are all ways to do it there with that. But again, Jeff's saying that in the few sources he's talked with within the building, they expect DeCosta to be active and aggressive in doing this as well. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting because I said this on yesterday's show, doing the roster predictions, especially for the running back position. I could see offensive line being a priority too, like Jeff said in his article. By the way, go check out Jeff's article. It's a great piece of work here. But yeah, I could see it happen where we're not looking at this final roster with just the announcement that we're going to get today. And if you've seen that announcement already, maybe you like it, maybe you don't. I don't know. We're recording this before that all happens, obviously. But, you got to wonder how many of those guys that make the roster are going to be made, expendable for handshake deals or made expendable for other guys coming in. There were a bunch of names floated yesterday as options, guys who have already been cut. Matt Sharping, former Texans offensive lineman playing for the Eagles. He got cut. He's a versatile player. I could definitely see the Ravens bringing him in as, look, they need a vet in that room. They need another vet in the offensive line room. I could certainly see Sharping being an option. Matt Breida was cut by the 49ers as a running back option. Bam Knight was cut by the Lions. There were a lot of others as well, wide receiver-wise. Apparently, John Mechie might be available for trade. Teams are inquiring because Houston does have now Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, and Tank Dell. So Mechie kind of factors in as their 4. Donovan Peoples-Jones is expected to be, I think, released by the Lions. I can't remember if it was traded or released. I believe it was released. And then Tim Patrick, former Raven, actually, Ravens legend Tim Patrick, wide receiver for Denver, is expected to be traded. They're going to move on from him. So those are all options for the Ravens. Also, Samaje Perine, Denver running back, former Bengals running back, special teams value. He screams third running back that ends up being, once Keaton comes back, the 4th guy. You can sneak him on the practice squad if you want to. My prediction would be Baltimore gets Perine and they get Max Sharping. I think they don't add a wide receiver. I think they go Perine. I think they go Sharping. I'm putting names to it. I'm going a step further than positions. I'm going names as well, which is kind of crazy to think about. But that's just what I predict. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. But it would make a lot of sense if, they don't necessarily want to go into the year with John Kelly or Chris Collier and they want to bring in somebody else. And again, these are just the guys that I know of at the time of this recording. I'm sure as you're watching or listening to this, there are other names that have been released and maybe there's a better option. But right now, as I'm recording this, Sharping and Perine are the 2 best that make sense to me. I was a huge Donovan Peoples-Jones guy. I would love Donovan Peoples-Jones, if we're being honest. He was someone I would have taken in the 3rd round out of Michigan all those years ago. Didn't work out in Cleveland. Obviously didn't work out in Detroit this time around either. But the thing is, where's the room? Because is it Donovan Peoples-Jones or Dayton Wade? Right? Is Donovan Peoples-Jones or Tyler Wallace? Where is the guy that gets, squeezed from the roster with that? Because that's the other thing you have to factor in. Is it an upgrade enough to make that move? To lose the either experience that the guy has on the roster being in Baltimore and familiarity with the team, the playbook. Is that upgrade enough? Is it enough of a needle mover? I'm a big, needle mover guy. Move has to be a needle mover. If it's not, then I don't necessarily think it's all that worth it, but I do expect, as Jeff says, Baltimore to be active as well. I don't expect DeCosta to still sit on his hands. He never does. He's always looking for ways to improve this roster. And by the way, another note here is that the Ravens are going to have 4 comp picks coming in. They lost so many free agents at price points that they're going to have 4 comp picks coming in regardless of the Henry signing. I mean, it's not even close. So I think that the Ravens can be more aggressive with their draft picks because they know that they have a lot coming in already. I think to me, that's something that you have to factor if you're Eric DeCosta. I would use that if I was Eric DeCosta, I would use that to my advantage. I would say, you know what? There are these comp picks going to come in? Yes, absolutely they're going to come in. With that, knowing that you have all that extra draft capital coming next year, that allows you to be more aggressive with your moves, whether that is acquiring a guy before the season. Maybe you save that and acquire a guy at the deadline if someone becomes available. I think that that's a perfect way to look at it is other draft picks are coming in. You want to win right now. I think you can trade away, be more aggressive with your picks maybe than if you didn't have those comp picks coming in, because I think you are weighing the now with the future and you're getting the best of both worlds, knowing you can expend a few more picks and get those out of the way, bring in a vet, and then you still have other picks coming in the offseason with your comp picks. So that to me is where I would go with that. But there are a lot of different decisions that DeCosta has to make, obviously, with the roster, first of all, and then in the coming days as IR stashes happen, guys getting moved on certain lists, handshake deal guys coming back, potentially adding some pieces. It is all just moving parts. And coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk about the first moving parts that were made. The Ravens made a handful of cuts on Monday. So be sure to stay tuned. We'll talk about that and so much more coming up next here on Locked On Ravens. We're back, our final segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher here with you, still on this Tuesday edition episode. Really appreciate everybody's support here on this show, whether you're an everyday or you listen every single day. Thank you for your consistent support. If you're new to the channel, welcome in. Hopefully you'll stay a while on the show, whether you're watching or listening. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button if you're on YouTube. Really would appreciate that. We're free and available, by the way, both platforms, however you get your podcasts, or on YouTube. No money involved. FREE. And if you're somewhere in the middle, thank you for your support as well. This is episode 1322 of Locked On Ravens consecutively. We've never missed an episode of this in 5 years, 5+ years. So really appreciate everybody who has stuck with me here. Also, a couple notes here. We, again, are going to go live after the Ravens announced their cut downs. So if you're watching this before, be sure to stay tuned for that. If you're listening to this after, be sure to check that out because that will be a more updated look at what the Ravens have done. Also want to give a birthday shout out to Alyssa, someone who's important to me and has, shown me so much support, doing this and, has never wavered in that. And, someone who means a lot. So happy birthday, Alyssa. It, your support means the world in every single aspect. But let's get into the first cuts that were made for this Ravens team because there were, this is kind of a thing that happens in waves. And this was the first wave on Monday. So I'll just go through the names first. Deshaun Manning, the offensive lineman, Mike Rigerman. You got Scotty Washington, both those guys tight ends. Washington was waived with an injury settlement a couple days ago, but you got Sean Ryan, the wide receiver, Russell Gage, the wide receiver, and then also Pepe Williams as well. And Emory Jones came in. Williams and Jones came in more so on the later side, but those are the cuts so far for the Ravens. So 2 tight ends, offensive line, corner, quarterback, et cetera, et cetera. I think the Pepe Williams one, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, that is the biggest one. Pepe is a guy that, you root for, you love, and, everything that, he did over the course of his career for Baltimore, it was all health where he wasn't able to stay on the field. So he wasn't really able to do a bunch. And it's unfortunate because, they spent a 4th round draft pick on him, a lot of high hopes. I thought he flashed early in his rookie season, especially in the preseason, but it just never came to fruition. And are you keeping a Pepe Williams over a Bo Braid, over a Sanusi Kane, over a Jalen Armour-Davis, even over a Bump Cooper? The answer to all 4 of those to me is no. And I think he played his way off. I think the final thing for him was he played his way off the roster in that Green Bay game, which we talked about yesterday. I've been, vocal about that, where missed tackles, missed opportunities, getting beat for a touchdown in the area of a lot of completions, like all of that did not help him whatsoever. And so, of course, I feel like Baltimore would want him back on the practice squad. I feel like Pepe is going to look for a new opportunity. And honestly, we'll probably get claimed on waivers if we're being honest. But if not, I feel like he'll look for a new opportunity. And that's fine. I get it. Wouldn't be shocked if Seattle swooped in and picked him up. I just, Mike McDonald swooping in. Wouldn't be shocked if we saw one Raven go to Seattle, right? Would that shock anybody? Definitely wouldn't shock me. I know there's a lot of conversation about Emory Jones as well. Emory's a guy that, I thought actually, he did well when he had the opportunities. That first preseason game, everybody, that was not an opportunity. It was not an opportunity. All right. He had one play in that game. It was a weird play. The offensive lineman got beat in just utterly poor fashion, and he lost the ball. That wasn't an opportunity. But the next game, the Falcons game, that was his opportunity. He delivered on that. Would definitely love to see him back as a practice squad guy if Devin Leary is not that guy for them. Obviously, we got word yesterday that the third emergency quarterback rule, that's now gone. So that does change the way that teams are going to go about the quarterback position. For the Ravens, I would not keep Devin Leary on the roster. I would try to get him on the practice squad. If he's not on the practice squad, Emory Jones can be your guy, and I'm totally fine with that. But I would not have Leary on the roster as opposed to Dayton Wade, Bump Cooper, Joe Evans. So maybe they do. They obviously like the developmental traits. I didn't see a ton from him, but it's not up to me. It's up to the Ravens. So I'll go through my final roster one more time because I've not missed one yet. Russell Gage was the other big one, I guess, compared. I think he's the one that got the most buzz nationally because he is the biggest name nationally. It's just Anthony Miller came away with that practice squad vet spot, in my opinion, right? If you get cut this early, if your cut is announced this early, it's probably not looking good that you're going to be back with the team. Some guys are. I'm not saying it's, okay, you're done like 100%, but I'm not expecting any of the guys back with the team on the practice squad or anything like that. I expect them all to find opportunities, but if one or two go back to the practice squad, would not be shocked. So my final roster, just one more time. 2 quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson, Josh Johnson. 3 running backs, Derrick Henry, Justice Hill, John Kelly, although wouldn't be shocked if they only kept 2. Fullback, 1, Patrick Ricard. Wide receiver, 7, Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Nelson Aguilar, Tez Walker, Deontay Hardy, Tylen Wallace, Dayton Wade. Tight ends, 3, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, Charlie Kohler. Offensive line, 9, Ronnie Stanley, Andrew Voorhees, Tyler Linderbaum, Daniel Falele, Roger Rosengarten, Patrick McCary, Ben Cleveland, Salah, Nick Samek. Defensive line, 4, Justin Madubuike, Michael Pierce, Broderick Washington, Travis Jones. Outside linebacker, 5, Kyle Van Noy, Alfred Owe, David Ajabo, Tavius Robinson, Joe Evans. Inside linebackers, 4, Roquan Smith, Trenton Simpson, Malik Harrison, Josh Ross. By the way, Josh Ross was in a car accident apparently yesterday, and he's in concussion protocol, so prayers to him. Obviously, thoughts are with him. I don't know if that changes anything in terms of if he's going IR or not, but I have him on the roster right now personally. 6 corners, Marlon Humphrey, Brandon Stevens, Nate Wiggins, TJ Tampa, Jalen Armour Davis, Bump Cooper. 6 safeties, Kyle Hamilton, Marcus Williams, Eddie Jackson, Darius Washington, Sanusi Kane, Bo Braid. 3 special teamers, Justin Tucker, Jordan Stout, Nick Moore. Some notes, 3 handshake deals here, Brent Urban, Chris Board, Daryl Worley. 2 injured reserve designated to return, so that's Adisa Isaac and Arthur Millette. Season-ending IR, I have 3, Owen Wright, Rasheen Ali, Trayvon Mullen. And then practice squad priority guys, you got guys like Devin Leary, Pepe Williams, we talked about, Josh Tupou, Kadar Holman, CJ Ravenel. You have Andy Rigby, Anthony Miller. I think Malik Cunningham's one of those guys, Josh Jones, Darren Dalcour. So all those guys, I think, are priority practice squad players. But this is kind of where I have it. And I think this roster makes a lot of sense, gives them added opportunity. I think you could easily swap out John Kelly with a vet running back. And then offensive line wise, I think you can swap out Salah for a vet offensive lineman. So I think this roster, honestly, to me, and if you want the more detailed version of why I did this, be sure to check out yesterday's episode where I go in much more detail. That was our final prediction episode. I just wanted to run through it quickly because we are on cut down day. But I thought I was able to get everybody I wanted on the roster. There was a lot of room, so I was able to have a luxury of keeping a 7th wide receiver. But the thing is, if you're going to add multiple vets, you have to cut down on a couple certain positions, probably wide receiver, maybe safety potentially. So those are all different things that have to factor in to your decision if you're Eric DeCosta and the Ravens. That's all I have for you today on Locked On Ravens on this Taco Tuesday. Again, really appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll see what happens with the offensive line when that is announced, but John Harbaugh saying that they have their group. Coming up, we'll be back again later today. We'll be going live after the Ravens release their final 53-man roster. We'll talk about it, we'll break it down, and we'll instantly react to the news. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I'll see you right back here later on today on Locked On Ravens.